class. Over to you, Lizzie.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. It is so fun. I realize I'm looking at my screen over here as I get on here because I'm always so mesmerized to see where everybody is from. Oh, cool. Anya says, daughter and mom from New Hampshire using this class for homeschool. Welcome. I learned to cross stitch from my mother as well when I was young. We're from Florida, Indianapolis, Connecticut. I saw some from Wales, Winter Haven, Florida. I believe that's where Rifle Paper Co. is headquartered, which is one of my favorite small kind of crafty businesses I look up to. Hello from north of Boston, Deborah. We were just there a couple weeks ago. We were in southern Maine. So there you go. Hello from New York City. It's so lovely to see you all. Thank you for joining us today. We are now in class 2 of our 4-part crafting your cross stitch projects for the holidays. I'm going to pull up my notes here just to make sure that I don't forget to mention anything, just a little housekeeping as we get started here. So if you haven't joined us yet last week, if this is your first one, welcome. We've got our pattern for today, as well as last week and other classes patterns available. Stitchpeople.com/Michaels. You can go get your pattern and your supply list of everything you need. And also, we love to interact with you. We love to see you. What's great about Zoom is we can all hop on a call like this and kind of see one another, but it's hard to follow up with each other here when you're just doing a 1-hour chunk of a class, right? So if you are on Facebook or if you are on Instagram, please post a photo of what you're working on so that we can see what you're up to and comment and like it. The best way we can follow your projects, especially if you're doing the ones that we're doing here together, which we'd love to see, is if you use the magical trifecta of hashtags. If you do Stitch People, hashtag Stitch People, hashtag DMC, and hashtag Make It with Michaels. That's the best way that we can find you for this particular class. It's like a honing signal to say, come find my post. So we want to see what you're up to, and we want to see, especially what I love to see, is how everybody customizes their own patterns and really makes them their own, because that is what Stitch People, that's what our brand is all about. So would love to see that. And last week I had to squish this in at the end, so I'm going to say it at the front so that I don't forget and don't have to rush through it at the end. At the end of every class that you've signed up for, you'll get a survey about this class. So please fill it out when you get it. It helps us do better. It helps Michaels know what you like. It helps us know what you like. So let us know your thoughts. Everything, a lot of people who've been with Stitch People for a while know that we love your feedback, and a lot of what we do is driven by your feedback. So please fill out that survey, and don't forget to sign up for next week's class. The title is Cookies for Santa. We're going to be learning about how to stitch a mason jar lid and make some like neighbor gifts out of that, or coworker gifts, things like that. So it'll be same time, same place, this time next week. So that is officially all of the business that I don't have to squish in now at the end of class. I also, I believe that Felicia mentioned this at the start of class, but if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat there in Zoom. If you're not seeing that chat button, you can click chat at the bottom of your screen in what is that? A little bar of icons, options. Press chat, stick your question in there. I've got Spencer over here, just to my side. He's on his own computer, my husband and business partner, and he's keeping track of all of the comments, all of the questions on the chat. So if anything pressing comes up, please ask. You never know. Likely somebody else in the class has the same question as you, so please don't be afraid. I truly don't believe in silly or stupid questions. So anything and everything that pops in your head, related or not, let us know. We'll answer it. I'm an open book. So today is hashtag gifted. Just a silly little title for a class. As you know, the theme of these 4 classes between Michaels, DMC, and Stitch People is cross-stitch crafting for the holidays. So these classes are less how to cross-stitch and more what to do with your cross-stitch projects once you're done stitching them. With cross-stitching as a hobby, it's one of these things, and I would say crafting in general, sewing, quilting, whatever lights you up. It's hard to know what to do with all of your projects because it's fun to make them, and you work on patterns, and you do everything you need and want to do. Spencer's helped me out with a thing. I'm just mesmerized. Thank you, Spencer. He works magic. I don't know what he does in the background, but I know he makes it work. Anyway, when you've got a hobby like any crafting hobby, it's hard to know what to do with all the projects you make. You can only give so many away. You can only hang so many on your wall. So hopefully these 4 classes give you a bit of an idea of some new and fresh ideas of things to do with your cross stitch projects, by way of gifting and utilizing your hobby and your craft and your work in practical and fun and new and interesting ways. So, and if you think of anything else as we're going, if this inspires you or gives you an idea, put it in the chat. Let us know what it makes you think of, because oftentimes that's how the best ideas come, right? It's like a little inspiration avalanche, and you start at the top of the mountain, you get a little snowball going, and soon you've got an avalanche of creativity. And that's what I love to see. So please let us know whatever ideas this class gives you in the chat, and we can all sort of learn together. So I'm going to switch my view over here to my stitching. And while it's on my brain, I'm going to ask Spencer, could you go into the other room in my crafting cart and grab our floral motifs book? Yes. Because that has instructions that I can put on the screen. Today, hashtag gifted, there's my little hashtag, right? We are learning to make gift tags out of our cross stitch work. Michael's has a really cool product. I know it's for sure available online. I'm not sure about in stores, especially given, every store around the country, but for sure these are available online. It's this Recollections brand. They're called shaker tags. I know they've got round ones as well, and they've got these cool square ones, and they are just tags, blank canvas tags, ready for you to use them and utilize them and make them your own. And so we thought, what better way to use them than with our cross stitch projects. So you can check that out. I believe it's in the materials list on your pattern. I've printed out our pattern here today. We have a little caroler here, like a little Victorian caroling, Dickensian little gal. This is just a kind of holiday-esque, Christmassy, festive example of with Stitch People, we like to encourage you to make things your own. We have a whole set of Christmas Carol patterns. Spencer and I, anecdotally, we met doing a local production of A Christmas Carol, and he was young Scrooge and I was Belle in the story of Christmas Past. And he actually was the first boy I'd ever kissed because of that stage kiss. But he was dating someone else in the show at the time, so it wasn't as romantic as you might think. But when we reconnected at college later, it was like, hey, I know you. So anyway, Christmas Carol is a story very near and dear to my heart, to Spencer's heart. We've continued to do a bunch of productions of it in our local area. Community theater is very popular. So we love that story. We love that show. We even did a podcast version of it last year that you can find if you're interested. But with that said, we have a whole, appropriately to our beloved interests, we have a whole collection of patterns for Dickens' A Christmas Carol, cross-stitch patterns. So we have some like carolers in there and whatever. And I just love that kind of Victorian, dreamy Christmas theme. It's just kind of gaudy and sparkly in my mind's eye. And so it's fun. I think it's a fun theme, a fun way to bring in, holidays. A lot of people love that kind of old world feel for the holidays. So we thought, why not make a little caroler for our pattern today? Because especially, like I said, this isn't necessarily a how-to class, but I did want to touch on a few technique things before we jump into sort of the crafting element. So I'm going to go over, first of all, as far as technique is concerned, a little bit of math. This is similar to last week's, but updated for this week's project specifically. So bear with me if you were part of last week's class. It'll be a little redundant, but refreshed for this week's dimensions. So one thing to consider when you are making a cross-stitch project specific to something like a gift tag, or last week we used a 4-inch hoop to make an ornament. So whatever it is that you are choosing to create, you want to take the dimensions of the thing into account in parallel to the pattern that you're using. So if you have found a pattern online, if you've used a pattern from DMC or one of their, DMC's got a lot of great free downloadables. If you have a book of patterns that you like, whatever pattern you are using for your cross-stitch project, you want to take the final dimensions of your frame, be it a gift tag, be it a mason jar lid like next week, or an embroidery hoop. Take that into account and choose your Aida fabric accordingly. The reason I say that is you can save yourself some heartache, some stitching, because if you're using a small scale Aida fabric, you might want to do a little more stitching to fill in more space. Whereas if you're using a larger scale Aida fabric, you don't have to do quite as much stitching to fill in the space. What I mean by that is, if you're unfamiliar, Aida fabric comes in a number of sizes. Size 18, 14, and 11 are very common. You can find them, you know, at Michael's stores, Michael's online. DMC makes all of these sizes of Aida fabric. And what this number means is the number of squares or cross stitches per inch. So sure. So as you can see, Aida fabric is made up of squares. Many of you are familiar with that concept already. And the size of Aida fabric is how many squares or, you know, ultimately cross stitches per inch you can fit in there. So size 18 fabric is going to be a little bit smaller because there are more squares squished into that 1 inch space. There's 18 in an inch versus size 11 has only 11 in an inch. So you have a little more breathing room. So the reason I bring this up is our tag here that we're using for our hashtag gifted. It's just because the tag pun, guys. It's a really, really lame pun, if I'm honest, but you know, I was feeling punny. I'm all for a really terrible joke. So hashtag gifted. Our hashtag gifted tag is 2.75 inches by 4.4 inches. That's the space we're working with. And I always also recommend that you kind of double check the measuring on your own, because I believe this is more in reference to the full tag and not your, you know, just your little window. So anyway, that said, 2.75 inches by 4.4 inches in terms of size 18, 14, and 11 Aida fabric is 49.5 by 79 squares of stitching versus a size 14 Aida fabric is only 38 by 61 squares versus size 11 is only 30 by 48 squares. So your long edge of your size 11 fabric is as many squares as your short edge of your smaller fabric. So that's just something to take into account. I know it's a little logistical, a little boring, a little mathy, but if you are thinking of, oh, I want to make custom gift tags for all my grandkids for Christmas, and you've got 9, 11 grandkids maybe, that's a lot of stitching. And you can save yourself some time by using a bigger size of Aida fabric and just using, you know, having it look bigger in the space, having less space to fill because you're using slightly bigger canvas, essentially. So just trying to save you a little headache. Fewer late nights going forward into the holidays. I, heaven knows, have been there stitching hundreds and hundreds of custom portraits over my time. I have stayed up so late many a night stitching portraits. And if I had thought ahead to maybe have a bigger fabric so I didn't have quite as much space to fill, your future self will thank your past self for making that decision. So without further ado, and now that our kind of logistics are taken care of, you've planned this out, we're using this tag, we've measured it, we've chosen size 11 fabric, we then cross stitch our motif. And we have these bundles available through DMC. We've got all the, you know, the materials lists available, stitchpeople.com/Michaels. So just to show you what we've got. Last week, if you missed it, we talked specifically about using DMC Light Effects floss, or this kind of metallic floss. This one's a little bit finer, I believe, than the traditional Light Effects, but it works in a similar way because it's very stiff. So go to Michael's YouTube channel and rewatch last week, because we talk about some really great tips and tricks for using this kind of tricky, stiffer, metallic-y floss. Those are all very technical terms. You are welcome. So I have gone ahead and pre-stitched our motif here because, again, today's focus is the crafting of the finished product, but I do want to teach you the Bullion stitch. And I had Spencer grab, this is our latest book, Stitch People Floral Motifs. Just as an aside, a lot of people like to add floral motifs to their portraits. You know, at the bottom of their, let's see, I'll show you an example. Like this, like they'll stitch a little portrait and they want to add a little floral motif. This is I did this one of a friend of mine there. They named their baby Robin. So I put some little robins and eggs in a wagon wheel nest at the bottom. So we have a whole book about this. The reason I bring it up is because this book in particular has instructions for stitches, including I think don't I have the Bullion stitch? Oh no, I lied. I don't have any Bullion stitches in here. Well, that was a dud. I'm so sorry. I misremembered. I was going to put the instructions here so you could see them, but we'll just do it together. What was that?
Got it in the DIY book.
Oh, well. Oh, well, we'll just move right ahead. Okay. So to do the Bullion stitch, I'm sorry I led you astray on that book. That was an unplanned idea that I did not think of in advance. And that's why you think of things in advance and stick to your plan so that things are clear. I'm going to cut 2 lengths of floss here. What I'm going to do is utilize the Bullion stitch for the ringlet curls that you see around the little girl's face. Bullion stitches are really great for adding dimension and texture. As far as Stitch People goes, in particular, like I mentioned, they're really, really great for curls, for dreadlocks, for ringlets. You can sort of mix them into, if you do a combination of French knots with Bullion stitches, you can kind of get like a real full, you know, Princess Merida style head of curls. So because we're doing a hairstyle, one trick I like to do with Stitch People portraits is mix colors to create a more natural hairstyle. So I'm going to cut just, I like to do a forearm's length of floss or just up to my forearm, you know, where my elbow bends, or to my bicep. And I like to mix floss colors just because most of us have hair that has low lights, highlights, middle tones, lots of dimension as the light catches, as it bleaches in the sun naturally or fades during the wintertime. So what I'm going to do is use 2 strands. Oh, I'm on size 11. So I'm going to be using 4 strands total of thread. When I'm on size 14 Aida fabric, I like to use 3 strands of the 6-strand floss. But today, because we're using a slightly bigger fabric, bigger scale, I'm going to use a total of 4 threads. So I'm separating 2 threads that I've cut of DMC 938. I had a hard time reading that number upside down almost. And I'm going to use 2 threads of DMC 400 as well. And using 2 threads from these 2 different colors, which I will combine, that's going to give me my hair color. And it's going to look a little bit more natural because it is similar to how our hair really is in the real life. And as you can see, these aren't combining super well. They're staying pretty separate. So a trick you can do for when you're combining threads, especially in a way that you would like the colors to integrate well, like hair, highlights, lowlights, etc. Or another instance of this, again, I speak in Stitch People terms because it's my world. So another way combining floss colors would be useful is with like a sweater. For example, my sweater is made up of a light, medium, and dark kind of maroon color. So if I were stitching this sweater, I'd probably do a couple threads of a few different colors, and I'd really want them to be nicely combined, nicely integrated, so it didn't look like stripes of color and more integrated color. So what I do in that case as just a little trick is to actually separate all of the threads, get them all individual, and then create your own little rope or twist of 4 threads together. This way, by separating them all and then recombining them, the 2 dark threads aren't going to be combined and the 2 light threads aren't going to be as combined. It's going to be a little bit more organic. So that's just a little tip, is to take the extra time to separate them each individually and then combine them all a little more organically.
Remind me what colors you're using.
This is DMC 938 and DMC 400 to create sort of a reddish brown, like a dark auburn hair color for a little caroling lady. Now I'm just threading my needle. I usually wet the ends of my floss with my spit. I'm a licker. You can also use, I think there's like beeswax and specific tools for that, which is better for your floss. It's better for your needle. I'm telling you, that is a better choice. And if you want to be a very classy, traditionally trained embroiderer or cross stitcher, don't lick it, use the wax. But I'm a jump right in kind of gal, and I take shortcuts sometimes, so I'm a licker. So as far as the bullion stitch goes, what I like to do whenever I'm doing any sort of embroidery stitch that I'm just starting with, I'm not doing any cross stitches first, I'm not doing anything that's going to particularly anchor my floss, and I don't want my floss to pull through, because with cross stitch, as many of you know, there are many options to start and stop your stitching. I prefer not to use any knots. So as such, as I pull my floss through the back, that tail is going to be loose, and I don't want that. So one thing that I like to do is I call it pre-securing my floss. So if I were doing a French knot, Bullion knot, embroidery stitch of any kind. What I like to do with my freshly threaded floss here is just pull my needle through some of the existing stitch on the back. And this is an option usually because when you're doing these types of detail stitches, it's usually on top of existing cross stitching or on top of existing embroidery of some kind. So the back of your fabric will have existing stitching to sort of anchor into. And what I like to do is just pull through a couple times. I even caught my own tail there. And just pull, pull, pull. And there you go. As I'm pulling this floss, you can see it's real tight. It's not going anywhere. We are good to go. Now, I already have a bunch of Bullion stitches there so that you could see, you know, we could photograph them for the pattern for the ad so that you could see them. But I'm going to add some more so that we can learn how to do them together. And this one, I'm always a little rusty, no matter how many hundreds of times I've done it. It always takes me a minute to get in my groove. So please be patient with me as we learn this together. So I'm just referencing my notes here. What I like to do is you bring up your stitch. You need to think of your stitch. You need to visualize it ahead of time. I find that's really useful, and visualize how long you want it to be. So in this case, we have these little Bullion stitches that are, you know, the length of her bangs essentially. So that is, for those of you who are familiar with like a daisy stitch, a lazy daisy stitch, when you're making flowers, you sort of have to think ahead as far as how big you want each petal to be. This is very similar thing. So you need to have in mind how big you want this stitch to be and how much space you're taking up. And I'm going to put it actually right here on the side. So we'll start here. So there's sort of an A point and a B point and an A point. You come up, you bring your needle up through the A point. You bring it down through the B point.
Where is the B point?
The B point is at the opposite end of how long you want your stitch to be. So like I said, if you're thinking of how long you want your stitch to be, it's for this particular example, the length of her bangs from her forehead to the top of her head, right? So here, the A point is right at her hairline. The B point is the top of her head. It's just A is the first end of your stitch and B is the bottom end of your stitch. A and B are the bookends of the length of your stitch. Okay. So you bring your needle up through A, pull all the floss up so you have your full length. Then you come down to B and you sort of scooch back into A. So you bring your needle, poke your needle down through B. So make sure my screen is there. And then you bring your needle exactly back through the A point. Okay. So I'll just leave it here so you can kind of see what this looks like. It's a lot more complicated to explain than it is to watch. I'll tell you that much. So you've just brought your needle up and then kind of almost like a safety pin style, threaded your needle back through the point you brought it up. Okay. Then you wrap your needle like a spiral. So you wrap your needle with your floss, the portion of your needle where the point is, the front end of your needle, and you wrap your needle as many times. Ooh, thank you. When I'm zoomed in, I have very little like wiggle room here. So Spencer always keeps an eye on my screen to make sure that my cross stitching is visible. So how many times do you wrap your needle, you're wondering? I will tell you. You wrap it as many times as it takes to create a spiral, or in this case, I'm just going to call it a little ringlet curl that is as long as you essentially need it to be in context of your pattern. So I actually think if I'm looking at my A to B point, A being here and B being there, I might even actually have one twist kind of too many. I've got, this is my length of my curl and this is the length of my stitch. So hopefully that makes some sense. So I will, let's see, just for the sake of it, I'm just going to leave it like this. And then you pull your needle through. And this is where it gets a little tricky. You just got to be slow and steady and gentle. But you pull your needle through and essentially you can also gently hold. I don't want to cover this up because I want you to be able to see it. But a way you can make sure this goes smoothly is to loosely hold your spiral in place as you pull. Because essentially what you're doing is pulling this loose floss thread through the center of your ringlet curls like you know, those, I don't know what's coming to mind, like those breadsticks that are on a stick, you know, and they wrap the dough around the stick and you can pull the stick through the center. That is what we're doing here. It's a breadstick. Why is that what came to my head? That's so silly. Anyway, so I am going to gently hold my spiral as I pull my needle through, and I will cross my fingers. Like I said, I'm always a little rusty on this stitch. We'll learn together. I'm going to cross my fingers that works. And you'll see sort of there's a little direction change that happens, and that's good. You pull your needle, you follow the direction it wants to go. You scrunch your spiral as you pull your floss. And look, we just made a brand new ringlet curl. And then what do you do with your needle and floss? We're back at the B point, the top bookend there, and you just stick your needle right back through and pull it down. Ta-da! We did it, folks. And that is the magic of the Bullion stitch. I love this stitch. If you want to go down, I'm going to, you know what? This is some intense stitch talk here. So I'm going to switch to my camera so I can look you straight in the eyes and tell you about the Bullion stitch. It's a really great stitch. Like I said, it sounds more complicated to listen to, and we'll go back and do another one just kind of quicker in succession so you can see it. It's a lot easier to do than it is to think about. Kind of like walking, like you put the heel of your foot and switch to the ball of your foot, like it's just, you just walk, right? So with the Bullion stitch, we'll do another one, but I encourage you to go down like a little internet rabbit hole searching the Bullion stitch, because not only can you use it for ringlets, for curls, because let your imagination run wild here. Everything you're thinking of is possible. You can make these nice and long. You can make them really tight. You can kind of have a looser wrap around your needle. And as you're pulling through, just really make sure you're not pulling tightly so that you can kind of have a cool, wavy, looser looking knot. But what these are traditionally used for is not necessarily little tiny people, because that's just what we've started using them for in recent years. What you can do is build up Bullion stitches to create like flowers, and you can build up Bullion stitches to create beautiful, like organic floral elements, greenery, all this great stuff. So after we're done here, do yourself a favor and go Google Bullion stitch or Bullion stitch rose, Bullion stitch embroidery, and your mind will be blown as to all the things that you can do with this gorgeous stitch. So I just had to look you in the eye and tell you that. We'll do another one here today. So
quick question.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, stay within the natural.
Oh, that's a great question, Rebecca. You can, if it suits what you need to do, but I give you full permission to just stick the point of your needle wherever it needs to go to make your stitch happen. That is a way that I'm a very non-traditional stitcher. I tend to stick to Aida fabric, whether I'm cross-stitching or adding embroidery elements. And often I will utilize the holes of the Aida fabric, meaning the intersections of the weft and weave in the fabric. As I'm kind of poking through here, you can see on my camera. I do utilize the holes of the Aida stitches most of the time, but oftentimes I will go outside the box. So if you have to, don't be afraid to, because are the embroidery police going to come get you? No, there's no such thing. There's no such thing. No embroidery police. So I hereby grant you permission to do whatever the heck you need to do to make your thing look just right. So I'm going to do one more Bullion stitch down here, sort of to fill out this side of the hair. And actually, to Rebecca's point, I am sticking my needle in between the holes of the Aida fabric. I don't know if you can see that, but it's right in the center of this blue stitch. And I know for a fact, just the way the cross stitching is laying, that it's between the holes of the Aida fabric. Why? Because that's where I want it to go. Gosh darn it. So you bring your needle up, pull it all the way through so that you have your full length of floss. So that's kind of my A bookend of my stitch. I'm going to stick my needle down at the B bookend of my stitch. That's the full length that I want it to be. And just like a safety pin where you sort of catch the fabric, but you don't bring it all the way through, I'm going to bring the tip of my needle back out at that A point. Okay. Now I'm going to look at the length that I have to fill here, looking at my bookends, A to B, and that's about the same length that I'm going to need to wrap my needle. So I'm just going to wrap, scoochy, scoochy, scooch down my needle there. Rappy, scooch. Please, someone tell a recording artist to make like a line dance style song about rapping and scooching. Rap to the left, scooch to the right, clap once this time, clap twice this time. That kind of thing. I hope you're picking up what I'm dropping, because I would dance that. Doing the Bullion stitch shuffle. Okay, we are almost done. I'm just I'm going slow here so that I can gauge. Because I want to make sure you guys can all see what I'm doing too. And I'm gauging that length. I actually think I have, once again, I'm suspicious this might be a little bit too long, but what's great about this is you can squish all the little twisties down, and I want these to be real tight, you know, Victorian style ringlets. So it's okay that I have maybe one or two too many twists up here because it'll squish, you know, they'll get real compacted. They'll fit into the space. It's like a goldfish. They'll fill the size that you give them, right? So now I'm going to, sorry for my view, but I am going to just loosely hold, lightly hold my, the wraps of floss around my needle, my little spirals. I'm going to hold those in place as I pull my needle and curse the lotion that I put on my hands this morning as I try and pull that needle through. Okay, we got it. And now kind of once that floss gets tight, you can see that it wants to flip-a-rooney over this way, which we'll do, and keep pulling, making sure that our spiral stays in order there, nicely stacked and doesn't get twisted around itself. And we'll just pull, pull, pull. And you can see that spiral compress into itself. And then we just have to hide the end. So, okay, we've now done 2 Bullion stitches. There is going to be a little bit of a delay for me asking this question to you answering it. So I'm going to play some Jeopardy music for you. Would you like to see me do another Bullion stitch, or are we okay to move on to the crafting portion? So I'm going to count to 10 in my head.
Actually, rather than count, you can answer Luann's question. If you want to do embellishments with seed beads and other things,
do you add them to the floss as you're going, or do you cross stitch everything and then add
Ooh.
embellishments afterwards?
Whose question was this?
This is Luann.
Luann. She asked an excellent question. I don't know if all of you heard Spencer, so I'll repeat it. As some of you may be aware, and some of you may not, this may be news to you. I'm going to switch to my camera so I can look you in the eyes because that feels friendlier. As you're embroidering and cross-stitching, you can add beads, you can add sequins, you can embellish your portraits in so many fun ways. And this is very, very pertinent, especially for holiday crafting and cross-stitching, because maybe you're stitching a little menorah and you want to put little sparkly ends to your candles using sequins or beads. Maybe you're stitching a Christmas tree and you want to put a sparkly garland or cover it with ornaments that are a little bit 3D and use a combination of putting, say, a sequin, you know, and it acts as almost like a little saucer to the bead teacup that you put on top of it, right? You have a little double ornament situation going there. She asked kind of the general question is, when do you add those? Do you do all your cross stitching first and then add it on? Honestly, Luann,
Yes.
is that Luann? I don't know why I'm having a hard time with names today. That's a great question, Luann. And in a true Lizzie fashion, my genuine answer is A, do whatever works for you. I think a lot of times with crafting, we are so used to, I mean, this is just society, right? Like they put us through public school, they give us a syllabus, they give us requirements. We need to take this class and this class and learn these things and get these grades so we can move through the system. Like we're just very used to being told what to do, right? Going to work, you have your job description, you have your tasks. This is what you do and how you do it. So a lot of times we are very used to just like, well, tell me what to do. Tell me how to do it. What is the right way? And I just want to give all of you permission watching to just do what works for you. Crafting is supposed to be fun. It is an expression of your personal creativity. So do whatever works for you. That said, a lot of people have been crafting for a long time, especially embroidery and cross stitch. So people have figured out ways that are more effective than others. And unfortunately, as far as sequins and beads go, it really does depend how you're utilizing them and what you're utilizing them for. An interesting notion is kind of creating a little Bullion stitch of beads. Let's say we didn't have, I'm going to switch back to my stitching here. Let's say we did not have a little girl here, but rather we had a Christmas tree. And let's say we weren't making Bullion stitches for hair curls, but we were making Bullion stitches out of silver floss for icicles on the tree. Okay, so we could use that Bullion stitch with silver floss and just do fun little vertical sort of 3D icicles all around our tree. Or we could do the exact same thing that we just did, where we bring our needle up. I'm just going to talk this through because it's a fun idea. Bring our needle up and we go through B again and up through A. You know, we could do that Bullion stitch, or at this point, you could thread beads right on to all of this, and you could create a little stack of beads here, and then bam, stick it right back down. It would catch all of those beads and you would have a cool beaded icicle on your tree. That would be an option to use beads, and that would be a way that you would integrate them sort of while you're stitching on top of your existing cross stitching, whatever. If you want to just catch little beads here and there, tiny little beads, say again, Christmas tree is a great example of how you might use them. So if you had a Christmas tree, you're doing ornaments and all you're doing is cross stitching the Christmas tree, adding beads for ornaments. What I might do is I tend to stitch like in rows where I'll do all of the under diagonals and then all of the overs. So if you're doing that way, it would lend itself to do all of your under diagonals. And then as you're doing your overs, every once in a while, randomly, you slide a bead on and finish that cross stitch, and it'll just sit right on top of the cross stitch. Alternately, you could cross stitch your whole tree. It's a beautiful green cross stitch tree. And then you just bring your needle up, catch your beads, put your needle back down in the random places that you want your beads. So it kind of depends on what stitch you're using to catch those beads in sequence. If you're doing a sequin, are you putting a French knot on top to anchor it? Are you using a bead, et cetera, and so forth? There are some considerations to think about. So I don't have a super concrete answer, but I just hopefully in giving you an overview of possibilities, hopefully inspiring all of you as to how to do things. Buttons are fun too. You just make it work as you go. And if it seems like a good time to add it, go for it. And if you don't like it, cut it out or pick it out and do it again. No big deal. No one's gonna know. No one's gonna know. So did we get any responses? Would people like to see? We'll move on. Okay, perfect. I'm glad that you all got a good little overview of that Bullion stitch. So I like to just pull my cross stitching through the back of my existing stitching to anchor it down, cut it with my little clippers. Ta-da, we did the Bullion stitch, folks. I hope that was useful to some of you and new to some of you. And that is what these little circles represent for me in the way that I design my cross stitching. And so here we go. You've made this cute little thing. You've stitched all of your friends. You've stitched all your kids, all of your grandkids as cute little Dickensian carolers. Now what? Where is that box of the tags? Here we go. So you bought your tags. We've got our tags from Michael's. If you look at the back, it sort of shows you how to put it all together. So definitely whenever you're using some kind of product, read the directions and see if it makes sense for what you need it for. If not, do it your own way. But oftentimes, again, instructions do exist for a reason. So that's a good place to start. You will need some kind of glue. So just for example, I have my glue stick here. I really like this E6000 craft glue. I don't know if any of you use this, but it's like freaking super glue and I love it. You can get, glue gun, glue, crafting glue, whatever your favorite kind of crafting glue is, use it. You'll need it for this project. You can get it at michaels.com, Michaels stores, great stuff. So these Recollections tags specifically, whether you're using the kind of rectangular ones like we've got or the round ones, have 4 parts per tag. And the reason you can see these are all different parts. So you've got this little transparent plastic frame cover, which I would say is optional. But what's great about these tags is there's some lift. So you're actually not going to be squishing your work. So if you want to protect it, that is an option. It's not going to squish anything. But if you're confident that, these are just gift tags, or maybe you're using these as their own ornaments, which is a great option too. You might not want to use this, and that's okay, because it does it's a little foggy, so that's personal preference. We have a back piece. It's a little bit thinner, and it's just a nice solid back. We have our top piece, which is also thin like the back, but obviously there's the frame cut out. Then we have this middle piece that's a little bit thicker, and I'll hold these pieces up together so you can see kind of the difference in thickness here, where we've got the back piece, the top piece, and the middle piece are a little bit different in their thickness. And this is what I was meaning, where we've got a little rise. This is what I love about this product as far as using cross stitch is concerned. It lifts the top away from your work so that it's not squished. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So now comes the really scary part when you're crafting with your cross stitch, is cutting it out and just hoping that you get it right, right? So what I like to do is utilize the pieces that they give you to sort of gauge where I need to cut, how I need to cut and frame. So if I put all the pieces together, I've got this back, then I've got my spacer. Then I can put my cover, my little plastic transparent cover. And as you can see, it lays over the opening quite a bit. So that would be a good guide to use to cut out my fabric, because I know that it will stay within the edges of the tag, but it will give me just enough outside the edges to frame it nicely, outside the edges of that window, if you will. Like I said, just watching it is so much easier than explaining it sometimes. All these words. And then you put your top piece on to sort of hold everything in place. And you can see how there's a little give here. That's what I mean with this like kind of 3D raised option, where my cross stitch will sit here. This won't squish it, and it will be nice and visible like this. So I need to measure out where I need to cut. And I can hold this over, I can hold this over, and just sort of figure out what I want to do here. Now I am going to use, I just have a mechanical pencil. I'm just going to draw really lightly. And I'm going to measure, forgive all my ends here. I tried to iron them in so they'd be nice and tucked in. Let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and change there. So that's about right. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of delineate my top and bottom, because I happen to get that right the first time. I'm going to just count right to left. 1, 2. So this is just the edge, counting from the edge of my work over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's a little more, isn't it? So I'm gonna, that's a true 8. Let me double check this side. Okay, that's about 8 as well. So we'll go along here and we'll go along here. Okay, so now I've got my edges all sketched out. And I'm going to double check. This is, again, you want to, what's that saying in building and construction? Measure twice, cut once. I think in cross stitch, it's measure 1,000 times and cut once, because you put all this work in, you want to make triple, quadruple sure that you are making the right cut here. So I'm going to count my, measuring here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and a half-ish up there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and a half down there. Good, we did it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and change. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and change. So we did it. I still have yet to find my really good fabric scissors, so please don't judge me. And then you gotta take a deep breath, say a little prayer in your heart, and go for it. But also give yourself grace. And if you mess up and you have to start over, oh well. And because you did it once, you'll be able to do it a lot faster the second time. So I'm going to cut along my lines here, my little pencil marks. And what's nice about Aida fabric is there's a built-in grid. So you can just cut right along that. All righty. Spencer's probably thinking, oh, it got so quiet. I always get quiet when I use scissors. Woo, here we did it. We did it. And it looks pretty centered. Looks pretty centered indeed. I'm going to flip that just so it's a little easier to see here. Actually, I guess I don't even need that at all. Here, allow me to clean up my workspace so this is all a little easier to see. And we don't need our math anymore because we decided on size 11. Okay, great. So now what? Now we glue and we go. I would recommend very emphatically to avoid putting glue on your cross stitch piece itself. You never know, it might seem fine at first, If you need to glue, first of all, if there's ever any case where you need to put a glue, an adhesive, any sort of liquid, anything on your fabric, take, we just cut out a big chunk, take a scrap that you have left over and test it. If you have soap and you're trying to like wash your work because you've got something on it, test it first. Just make sure that it's not going to die or bleed. Just that's always a safe bet if you have to at all. Or if you can, avoid gluing the fabric itself at all costs. Because again, it might look fine today, it might look fine tomorrow, but in a year, you might pull this out to hang on your tree or something. And if you glued all along these edges, who knows? After a year, that glue might like bleed in, that glue might turn the fabric yellow. I don't know, you never know. So just be careful. You don't want to create heartache for yourself down the road. It's worth, it's like when you paint a room, like just take the time to tape it well ahead of time, even though it really stinks. It's the worst work. But if you take the time to just prep it, do it right, you'll be glad you did. So in this case, I will say these tags, you can sort of see how they're cut. And I would just recommend looking closely, especially if you're doing a lot of these and you want them to be consistent, either a series hanging on your tree, gifting these to people as gifts. The way the die cut is, one of the edges is going to be a little bit rounder and one of the edges is going to be a little flat. So that's just up to personal preference. I don't know if you care, but I'm the kind of person that notices these kind of things. So I just thought I would point it out to you to keep in mind as you're making many of these, to sort of decide, oh, I like that rounded cut look, or I like that flat look, and choose which you're going to be using as your backpack. I kind of like the rounded look, so I'm going to put that face down so that it's going to be my backside. And then what I'm going to do is lay my my cross stitch work down, and I want to make sure that none of these Aida fabric edges are overlapping. Looks like we did a bang up job here. We did great, because it fits just perfectly on there and there's no overlap, as you can see. Huzzah, we did it, friends. Now I'm going to put on this thick middle piece. It's kind of like a big spacer, and just make sure that that's going to look good. And I luckily have this overhead camera. I don't know why I was doing it sideways. I should do it front ways. I have this overhead camera and I can double check that it's going to work. And indeed, I've got a slight amount of wiggle room here, just, an 1/8 of an inch here or there to really nail that centering. And as you can see, even on this size 11 fabric, we had enough room that we could maybe add a, Noel at the bottom, or a name, or add even a little border. That's totally up to you. I just am mentioning that just so y'all can go crazy for the holidays.
I'm going to throw in a little tip here. I turned my microphone on so people
can hear you.
They should be able to.
He's a smarty, guys.
So the trick that I learned from framing a bunch of Lizzie's portraits over the years,
You helped me a lot.
is
just rounding my corners just to sort of match
when Lizzie was done stitching, she would just say, "Okay, like I'm done looking at this thing, please."
And so you'll notice that with the Aida fabric, it has some
You
give.
can stretch it in different directions. It's not always. It is a grid, but it's
See
not
that?
always like a square grid. So as you're doing this, if your fabric is a little off,
like this,
looks a little stretched like that, just pull it.
Yeah, there, and you'll find if we're getting scientific, Aida is technically an even weave fabric, which means there are an even number of, I call them the latitude and longitude threads because I have a hard time remembering. It's a weft and a weave. I can't remember which is which, but some go left to right, some go up and down. And the Aida fabric, even weave fabric, has the same amount of threads going up and down and left and right, which is why you get a perfectly square grid, but nothing is perfect. And there is a little give. One of the ways, like this, pulling this direction is a little less flexible. As you can see, pulling this direction has a little more give. So one of the weaves lends themselves to a little more stretching than others. So just, yeah, that's a really great tip, Spence. So, well, you're going, Lizzie, I want my cross stitch to stay in place, but you just said not to glue it. What should I glue? What I would recommend is just trying to keep your glue on the cardboard. And that's going to be, a little might get onto your fabric. It might be a little inevitable, but I really, really encourage you to keep it on the cardboard. I'm not going to include this plastic because I like the idea of maybe using this as a ornament, in which case, if you were using the plastic, you would put on the spacer piece, then you would put on the plastic, and then you would put on the top like this. And look, it doesn't squish your work because of that spacer piece, but it does, you know, it is a little foggy. If you're gifting these to kids, sticky hands, Christmas candy, you might want to use the protector, but I don't have kids yet, so we're going to just not. And I'm going to just put a little bit of glue on my cardboard. And I'm just going to dot it along the very, very edges here, where hopefully my fabric is not. I should probably have some sort of little tool. I would likely get those little, I use like barbecue skewers a lot with crafting, toothpicks, you know, that kind of stuff. So this is really strong glue, so I just need like a few little dots along the edges and it'll be just fine.
Is this preferable to a glue gun?
It's just personal preference, honestly. I wouldn't say for me, guys, I have a really crappy glue gun. I should get a better one. Look, it's old. Anyway. So for me, I like this. Like this stuff is pretty impervious. You could probably, they should have built the Great Wall of China with that. I swear, it's really, really strong. So now I'm going to put this in the center, trying not to touch any of that glue. And I did a pretty good job there. And now I'm going to add this spacer. And for me, I guess technically, since I'm not using the plastic, I could probably stop here if I wanted to for my finished project, because I'm not going to add the plastic, which would then be covered up by this top piece. I could also, you know, paint this top piece. I could wrap this top piece with ribbon. I could create, I don't know, I don't have a Cricut or a Silhouette, but if you did, I bet you could put those dimensions in and cut something out and lay some cool vinyl, something on there like a sticker, you know, and really make it your own, and maybe put the name or something on this. You could calligraphy that. I don't know, you could go crazy, get creative. But for me at this point, I could stop here. And what I am realizing is I can put some more glue. I'm just going to add a couple dollops around this top point because it touches there as well.
Brenda says you should bedazzle.
Oh, yes, right? Yes. Brenda? Yep. And because this is like a Victorian little Dickensian dealio, you can really get away with a lot. I love the ornate detail of this era, especially for Christmas time. Just glitter, glitter, glitter. Yes, please. So you could totally put like, you know, a big red bow at the bottom and, you know, red and gold and green and make it really, really Christmassy. So I'm actually just going to close off this glue because for me, like I said, since I'm not using this frame, if you were, you put it here, you glue on your top piece. I know I'm redundant, but I just want to make sure everybody understands all the pieces here. I've stuck this down, and this glue is pretty immediately useful. So it's holding pretty well as it is. You want to be careful, you know, if it's squeezing out the edges, clean that up really well. Just make sure it's nice and tight. And then honestly, you're pretty much done. You've got your tag. The only next bit would be to add some ribbon if you'd want to. And this, I just have, you know, some ribbon laying around the house. And I will show you my ornament trick from last week that I think some of you found useful. Your inclination with tying off this for a gift tag or a ornament is going to be to just like loop your ribbon and tie it and call it a day. But then if you are hanging this on a gift, if you're hanging this on a tree, regardless of where you're hanging it, it's going to want to lay like that. So if you're hanging it on a tree, it'll just naturally do. So what I would recommend is, and somebody told me the fancy word for this, the louver knot, somebody knows.
Crane neck.
Chris, something. Anyway, you put the two ends of your ribbon together, poke those through the hole, and as you're pulling, you're going to get a loop that together, you know, pull it through its own self. And now if you hang this on a gift or on your tree, it's going to face forward. You see? So you know, with the hole like this, and then, oh, here, I'll go to my camera. So if you've got a Christmas tree branch coming out. Oh, here, I'll just actually finish this loop. How about that? So I'm just going to make a knot just so that we're really quick, real fast here. I would probably make that a really cute bow if I was taking my time. But okay, so now we've got our gift tag, and whether we're using this as an ornament or as a tag, if you have a branch of your Christmas tree coming out like this and you hang it, it's gonna face forward. Or if you are on, if you've got a gift wrapped and you're looping this through, you know, ribbon or something, or a big bow on a gift, it's gonna lay flat right on your gift. Now, how do you identify whose gift it is? Hopefully you've matched your little person to the gift recipient. That's my number one tip, is to customize your little motif, whatever you're stitching here, to make it match your person. If not, you could just be doing like a little elf and a little Santa and a little reindeer and a little Christmas carol, or just like Christmas characters. Ways to customize this further: you could write a beautiful message on the back. You could print out a message, you know, on your computer if you don't like your handwriting, and tape it on the back. If you are getting real crafty, you could I know there's different options for if you want to reuse these year after year. You could put, I think there's like chalkboard paper that's like a chalkboard, and you could put a little bit of that on and like chalk on the name and erase it every year. Or like that whiteboard material, they have really thin dry erase board or paper, I think, of that nature, where you can use a dry erase marker, and it's kind of that shiny smooth paper that you can get dry erase marker off of. So that would be an option if you want to be temporary. You can, like I said, I'm just trying to give you ideas for what the heck to do with all of your cross stitch projects that you've built up throughout the year, how to get rid of them at the end of the year to your loved ones in ways that are new and fresh and unique, that aren't just hanging on the walls. So apologies if sometimes I get self-conscious about all my ideas, and I always call it brain vomit, but I just am hoping to throw things at you to inspire you as to, you know, how you can also, I'm like gesturing to the camera, even though I'm not looking at it, how to utilize your cross stitch projects in new and fun and unique ways. These make for great gifts. You can put them on gifts. They make great ornaments. You could hang these on jars. You could, heck, you know, if you are a jewelry maker and you made earrings, you could cross stitch their name up here and hang the earrings in the holes of the Aida fabric and display them like this. Great little jewelry earrings display holder. There are just so many ways that you can wrap cross stitching in to your other crafts, to your other gifting, to, you know, everything that you're doing for the holidays. So hopefully you're walking away a little more inspired from last week's ornament and this week's gift tag. We are almost to the top of the hour, so I'm going to just quick repeat my notes. Please, if you've stitched this little motif, I would love to see your Bullion knots. I'd love to see if you swapped any of the colors in this. If you've made this tag, please go to Instagram or Facebook, show us your work, and use the hashtag #MakeItWithMichaels, all one word, hashtag Stitch People, all one word, and hashtag DMC. Using those 3 hashtags is how we're going to be able to find you, give you a big digital high five. Don't forget to fill out the survey that you'll get at the end. And please sign up for next week's class. Next week, we're going to be learning a little bit of a Santa motif, is our cross stitch project, which again, we encourage you to do a lot of that cross stitching ahead of time. We're going to be talking about French knots as our little technique for next week, and how to do French knots in a speedy and foolproof way, hopefully. Hopefully it becomes foolproof for you. So we'll be talking Santa motif with French knots, and then we're going to turn that Santa motif into a mason jar lid and have an idea for like neighbor gifts, coworker gifts, something like that. So join us next week, stitchpeople.com/Michaels, get signed up, get the pattern, get the materials lists. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for joining us today. And as always, please keep in touch with us on social media, Stitch People, or email us info@stitchpeople.com. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And thanks, everybody. You have a wonderful, wonderful day. Ta-ta for now.